Yo, what it is, everybody, and thanks for tuning back in here to another episode here on the Speedbug channel. Today we got a video talking about long-term update here on the Ducati. I'm going to talk to you about it, let you know a little bit about maintenance, what I've thought about it, of course, which most of you guys already know. Yes, the bike is still for sale. It hasn't been ridden. See the cover still here on the floor. Obviously, it's uncovered here for the video, so I want to talk a little bit about this motorcycle and the long-term update on the ownership since I've had this bike. When did I get this? Since like March or April or something like that. Go over some of its issues, some of the things that I did like, some of the things I did like, and such like that. But this is not gonna be a full in-depth of like a review for this video because I've done quite a few videos on that here already. So I'm not going to bore you of the same thing that you've already probably watched 2 or 3 times anyway. So let me jump into it. Long-term update here on the Ducati. Has there been any major problems with this bike? Well, since I have had it, nothing major. Again, let me cover the most major flaw that I've had with this bike. Most major flaw was, I would say, that a bolt came loose. This bolt right here for the handlebars. Now, I think it just maybe came loose from vibration or such like that. It was loose, so I just stuck an Allen key in there and obviously tightened it up. That's probably like the biggest flaw or anything that has happened to it. Of course, there's been a few recalls and such that have been issued for this bike since it's come out, like for the gas tank, the levers and stuff. The shifter levers and such like that, which have obviously all been addressed and such like that, but no big deal and no issue. There also was a mapping issue that a lot of people obviously were complaining about the heat because it's a V formation motorcycle, but I was going to say V twin, but it's not. It's a V4 that a lot of heat comes up, through the tail section of the bike, and it does, because just as much heat is going to come over here as it is over here. But that's so much not the case. So what they would do is that when the bike was idling, every few seconds or so, they would shut the fuel off for the fuel injector so that the rear side, meaning the back side of the engine, wouldn't actually inject fuel into the motor, so it would cool down the heat some. Now, I have a few friends and other people that have this bike and they said it has helped, but I didn't necessarily care to have this done, so I actually did not have the upmap done to this bike. So if you would like that done to this bike and you do purchase this bike, just take it to your Ducati dealer and they'll obviously do it for you at no charge. Another crazy issue that I've had with this bike only one time, where I went to try and go start it and it wouldn't start. And not that like it wouldn't crank, it was cranking and cranking and cranking, but it wouldn't turn over. So I and then I smelled a bunch of gas, so I knew it was already flooded. The plugs were soaked. Now I'm like, okay, when I wanted to ride it, but it couldn't be ridden at the time. So you open the throttle blades, try and let it all come out, but you had to really let the plugs dry, which is obviously kind of odd here for a fuel-injected bike because that type of shit shouldn't be happening. But it still can happen on a fuel-injected bike, fuel-injected car, at any given time if the plugs in the cylinders become soaking wet. So you let it sit, you kind of, cycle the engine through, hopefully, it all burns out and stuff like that, and then obviously after a few minutes, it did start. But for the most part, the bike has been pretty much problem-free. Chain is pretty good, it hasn't stretched too much. I've tightened it, I think, twice since I've had the bike. Again, the bike still has about 1,100 miles on it. Whether it be some hard pulls, some soft pulls, or anything like that. Chain, I believe, on this bike, it's a 525 or a 530. I'm not 100% sure. But it looks like a 525 or 530 just by looking at it. I'd have to measure it for the pitch, but it doesn't matter. It's a stock chain, and it's held up pretty well. It is kind of noisy. It's not noisy because I haven't cleaned or taken care of the chain. I know what the hell I'm doing. It's just a noisy chain where it just rides on the track and stuff like that. But you don't want to make it too tight and you don't want to make it too loose. You could follow the Ducati parameters once they give that to you in your instruction manual. And it tends to run a little bit looser than your standard chain because that's the way they design the swing arm and that's the way they design this bike. So we're going to keep it always in spec, and that way I can't get any shit for it saying it didn't have this, or it was out of spec, it was too tight, or it was too loose. You get premature wear and such going forward. But everything else with the bike, I really haven't had any issues with the bikes. A couple other people have had issues with it leaking fuel or smelling like fuel and such like that. And I will just tell you that if you ride it hard, the tank definitely gets hot, and the evap in the tank for it to obviously vent, sometimes you can kind of hear the gas boil if there's not enough air movement and it gets hot. Almost kind of like a little bomb or something like that, but it's not going to go and blow off. I've heard it and seen it done on other motorcycles in the past. But for the most part, I haven't had really any issues with this bike. And it's, like I said, it's just time for me to move on. So if you're thinking about getting one, for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, it's pretty much for the most part been problem-free. Just except for the fact, like I said, why I'm selling it is because it's just not the bike for me. I don't like riding it. It's uncomfortable. It drinks a lot of gas. It's the riding position's uncomfortable. It's super harsh and all that because, again, this is a track bike, track weapon. And all of those things that I just listed about why this bike sucks is why this bike is so great on the racetrack. So, again, my quick review of major problems or anything since I've had this bike? No, not really. So again, Ducati I think did a really good job, and you can't argue the looks again, because when it does go, I am going to miss it, but it is what it is. So I wanted to give you guys a quick insight on that. Everything else has been great with it so far. No complaints. And that's going to wrap it up here for today's video. Again, if you guys like what you saw, again, don't forget to subscribe. You can check me out here on Facebook, Instagram, at the Speedbug, same name here as YouTube, and we will check you here for another episode here on the Speedbug channel. Deuces.